All right. Welcome everyone to the Cloudy County call for March of 2023. Apparently this entire year I've been using slides that said it was still 2022. Thanks, Joe, for
I got this
pointing
slide updated at least.
But this is our extension-themed, extension-focused learning community where we talk about Microsoft 365 products and hopefully, keeping it very relevant to extension, but also keeping it very accessible with tools that you already own, likely, and already have access to. We don't go too far down the rabbit hole, but every once in a while, like the end of last month's meeting, we started talking about some automation stuff, which actually inspired this month's meeting to discuss one of the products that was used with Microsoft Forms and Power Automate. And so this month, we're going to be talking about Microsoft Lists. I guess before we go too far, I should at least say, hi, my name is Dwayne. I'm a cloud solution architect with Microsoft, and I spent many, many years hanging out with Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hey, how you doing? I'm a systems administrator and a Microsoft MVP, and looking forward to talking about lists. I think it's one of our key tools that we have and take advantage of pretty often here. So great chance to give you an overview of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, are we going to talk about any what's new stuff, or are we just going to dive right into lists? Because our what's new was a little lean.
I don't know. That's up to you. I think we've got pretty good amount of material for lists that we like to show.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, normally what we would do is we would talk about some of the new features that have launched in the cloud products. But it was a little lean this month, and I think that Microsoft Lists is going to be a pretty big topic, and we are going to go down that rabbit hole on this call. In fact, all of you, if you are using Teams, if you are using OneDrive, and both of those are actually using SharePoint, you're all actually already using Microsoft Lists. You just probably didn't know it. And I guess there's like lists with a little L, and then there's lists with like a capital L, because the capital L is an actual lists branded app or product that Microsoft released a couple of years ago. But lists have been around for a long time, and they've been a part of SharePoint. And Joe, you had a saying that you would always hit me with.
Yeah, I mean, basically in SharePoint, everything is a list. Document libraries are a list. They just happen to be comprised of files. But as we kind of go through and show you what a list is compared to a document library, if you've been using just Teams or SharePoint for files, you're going to realize that you've been working in a list. And the concept around tracking information about an item you put into SharePoint, usually with a document, you've got a file name, a title, modified by, who created it, that kind of information. Those are all columns that are part of that document library, part of that list. And as we go through building a list out, you'll see those same kind of concepts.
Yeah, when you look at a list at first, and I'll pull up some demo ones here in just a second. When you look at a list at first, you're going to see something that honestly is kind of familiar. You're going to see rows, you're going to see columns, you're going to see headers, and even some filtering that you could do. And so at first glance, you might look at this and say, like, Dwayne, why should I care about this? Because Excel gives me rows, Excel gives me columns, Excel gives me headers, and I can even do filtering in Excel, and that's fine. And I would say, yeah, you're right. Like it's at first glance, it's kind of hard to distinguish the true power of Microsoft Lists and how it is different from just your standard everyday spreadsheet. And so we're going to go through some of the things that lists can do And hopefully by the end of this, you'll see that this is not just a table. This is not just a layout of, rows and headers and columns and stuff like that. This is actually, I think I said in the calendar invite, and maybe last month we talked about this, like you're getting close to like database ish type storage capacity, storage options. You can calculate things like you could in Excel, but you know, when you're in Excel and you want somebody to give you data, like you have to give them the whole document, right? Like you have to share the whole Excel file and say, please update, whatever. You can't even share a sheet in an Excel file. Well, in Microsoft Lists, you can share just a particular row, like one single item that is on a list that's laid out as a row. You could share that to another person and say, please input all these values. And then you could even dictate what those values could be. Like you can drop a drop down list and check from these 5 things, or you can, this must be a date or whatever. So there's kind of getting into forms type stuff, right, Joe? Like that is the technical term for the input into a list is a list form, right?
Yeah, and one thing you brought up about some of the troubles with Excel that I've seen users fight with sometimes is, especially when they want to share that out with someone, is worried about their data I guess you could say, getting kind of messed up, misaligned, and getting rows and columns kind of moved around a little bit and get out of whack. And that's something that this Microsoft Lists enables us to do, because it acts more like a database, a little bit harder. It's harder to do, pretty hard to do, actually, in that way. So being able and feeling more comfortable to share a list out and not having columns and rows get out of whack, or sort orders getting out of whack that you're used to, and some things like that that someone might change and want to do in Excel, but typically it changes it for every single person looking at it. And those are some of the things that we can overcome with a Microsoft List.
I'm going to share my screen, and Joe, apparently my Cloudy County demo computer just had a freak out. So I'm just going to share a different computer.
How many do you have?
Too many. Yeah, hang on one sec here. This is interesting, actually. Both computers are doing the same thing. When I go to office.com, nothing is populated. Give me a sec.
One other thing that you mentioned about lists that are nice, and just dive into that a little bit more, was the concept around the column types, the data that we can choose, and the data types is really nice with lists. That helps you input data consistently. Something with Excel that's harder to do. So if you want a column that's a date column, or if you want a column that's an integer, or you want a column that is currency, or maybe you've got a column that is some type of status column, those are some things that we can do and manage with and take advantage of with Microsoft Lists. So that's something that will be helpful to see. I'm going to share my screen. It looks like we've got some issues there, and I can even give you control there, Dwayne.
No, man, you can go for it. Thank you. The gremlins always come out right when you go to share your screen. So glad you're here. So we always tell people, I think we have said this on literally every single Cloudy County call. Whenever you want to explore a new app that's a part of the Office system, the Office suite, you should go to office.com. Office.com is where you're going to find all the apps. Now it's for some of these apps, there's desktop versions of it. Like we're all very familiar with PowerPoint, Excel, Word, etc., Outlook. But Office.com is going to give you the web version of all of those apps. And the thing at the top left, we like to talk about, we call that the waffle. That's where you're going to find the app launcher. And you're going to see a number of apps there already. And then at the kind of like the middle, it says all apps. That's where you'll see all the other things. But we're going to focus on lists today. So this is going to be what we would call the lists with a big L. This is the actual lists app. Now, just like forms and just like files, a list this database can live in one of two places. It could live in your OneDrive, which if we go back to the basics of OneDrive versus Teams, OneDrive is a place for things that belong to you versus Teams is a place for things that belong to a group of people, maybe a committee or department, an office, something like that. So you can create a list in your OneDrive, and then you would be the sole owner of that list and have total control. Versus putting it in a team where multiple people can all collaborate on it and work on it together. You can see List is doing a nice little prompt there to let you know that, hey, there is actually a desktop app of Microsoft Lists that you can install. It's it's like a web app that you can run, and it gives you a little, desktop shortcut. So you can see the second check, you can create a desktop shortcut there, and then you could launch Lists just like it was an app on your computer. You don't want to kind of feel stuck like you're going to office.com all the time. Lists, obviously, like I said, can exist in a team, so you can bring them into Teams in a few different ways. You can bring them in as a dedicated tab. You can pull them into SharePoint, and list them in a web part inside of a SharePoint site. So they're pretty mobile. Like they can live in lots of different places, and there's lots of different experiences. And last month, we actually showed you a list that we created based on the input that you gave us on Microsoft Forms. Joe, what channel did we have that thing in? That was in Cloudy Chat?
Pull that into, Cloudy Chat in this team. If you switch tenants and you're in this team, it will be right here and show that.
And so all of that data that's in there was populated by people filling out our fake form that we were using to automate collection of information from people and putting it somewhere so that we understood that something had to be done with it. We were kind of making like a mock work order system almost. But you'll see here, like I said earlier, we've got rows and we've got columns. We've got an email column, a phone column, what kind of farm is it, or the name of the farm. We have a location column, and these columns are column types. So they can have different types of interactive bits and pieces of information. They can be formatted differently. So you can see there where it says visit type, it's got like nutrient analysis and it's red and it's like looks like a big pill. That's actually the term for that is a pill. We've got more pills over on the status column. You can do shading on these. You can put icons on them. You can put all kinds of visual indicators for when you're looking at this list that you can visually figure out what's going on a lot quicker. Because like if you're looking at a giant eye bleeding spreadsheet that's just massive wall of text, it's really difficult to get an understanding of what is this data doing? What am I supposed to do with this data if your brain is processing just billions of letters and stuff? And so using colors and shapes and icons and stuff like that really helps you get a quicker understanding of what this list has in it and what should be done with it. And it's important to note that each of these, I'm using air quotes, each of these rows is technically its own dedicated entry into the list. The rows and columns is really just what's called a view. That's the way that we've decided to view this data in a grid. So Joe, if you scroll over to the left, you can just click on one. So you're actually kind of diving into the details of this list item. And you'll see a few different things here. Now, we are looking at this list through the Microsoft Teams experience, and we're going to show it to you through the SharePoint experience, and we're going to show it to you through the actual lists app experience. So there's a few things that visually will be a little bit different, feature-wise will be a little bit different. But you're kind of starting to see that this is the actual data that's connected to that item, and that item is just simply called Dwayne. that's the entry in the database, so to speak, is just Dwayne. So this is where you'll start to see, like I said, that this is more than just a spreadsheet, and it's more kind of like tiptoeing into database territory.
And this feels like a form that you're entering.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you if you edit that or double click on something or click on the phone number, you can start editing these fields. And this is now kind of like data input. You can see there on the status column, that was a choice column is the type of column that it is. We've got a calendar date picker that we can use now to say, like, when are we going to follow up? And so this is kind of a, like Joe said, a form. This is data entry at this point, just for this particular entry in our database. So yeah, definitely not like a spreadsheet. And that's just the start of it, the fact that it's a database. There's even more things that you could do with this. Like, you'll see the conversation and comments up at the top. You could actually have like a journal going on, like a little bit of a conversation history around this item itself, rather than around the entire document. So we're just going to talk about, let's say, one particular customer, or we're going to talk about one particular issue or item that we're tracking inside of a Microsoft list. I was just tagged by Joe there, which is kind of cool. I got a little pop-up. Can you move them around like cards? So yeah, you can actually. So that's we're going to get into what are known as views inside of Microsoft Lists. So that's a really good call out there by Dom, that there are views that you can change the way you consume all the data that's in this list. If you have a date on it, then you can actually rearrange this into looking like a calendar. It's not a calendar. Let me make that very clear. It's not a calendar like in Outlook or a shared calendar. It is simply a box that looks like a calendar that has items on it that are, have a date attached to them. They could even have a duration attached to them and span multiple days, but it's not a calendar in the sense that you can't synchronize it with Outlook, or have it pop up notifications on your phone, in a sense that you've got an upcoming appointment, that kind of stuff. But yeah, we'll get into some views and show you how to change how you view this data and how you can let other people view it a little bit differently, which is pretty cool. But yeah, this is kind of like just dipping our toes into what a list looks like and some of the anatomy, I guess, of a list, where you've got views, you've got items, you've got columns, and then we'll start digging into how to kind of tear it apart, right, and build our own. So, Joe, where do you want to start with building one?
One thing before we go too far, I want to just call out this other option here that we don't have in Excel that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Was the ability I can copy a link to a list item.
Yes. Yeah.
So I can actually share just this row with someone and give them the ability to view it, to update it, to edit it, just that one row. So that can open up your eyes as to maybe you've got some data that you're collecting and you need somebody else to complete it, but you don't need them to see all the existing data typically in your Excel spreadsheet. Like Dwayne was saying, it's kind of all or nothing. This allows you to perhaps enable a group of people or one person to view or edit or update that information in that single row without giving them access to everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. Like we've had really complicated folder structures and file systems for faculty and managing, their grants or whatever it could be. And now you could have a spreadsheet. I'm using air quotes a lot today. I don't know why. We're just gonna run with it. Spreadsheet that you could link to an admin assistant or the faculty themselves and say, hey, I need you to enter in all of these blank fields. So you could create a new item in that list and then share it. And you saw the sharing dialogue there is just like the sharing dialogue for a Word document. Like you get the same exact options. You can drop that down and say we need to specify who is allowed to see this. So you could put in an individual's name or a group's name or whatever. You can dictate what kind of access they have to it. Maybe they just need to be able to review this item that's on the list. They don't need to actually mess with it. You could share the whole thing in a view only mode as well. So it's pretty granular how you can dig into this. So Joe's showing us lists with a big L, right, Joe? So
yeah, this is in Teams. Here it is in SharePoint. And if you want to work in the Lists app or the Lists web app, this is what you get here also. This one's nice. If you're really diving into lists, you're going to spend a lot of time in it. This view is nice because you don't have you're not stuck with navigation from Teams or navigation in SharePoint. So you get a little more room here. SharePoint, you can kind of make these expand. They got a little expansion button here. So that's a little helpful, but a list is just going to kind of work that way when you're focusing in on a list.
Sorry, my dog is going crazy right now for some reason. Of course. Can you hear that? Or is the AI suppressing it?
Nothing.
Oh, interesting. So Jackie said that she is having issues with no apps showing up in Office, which is what I'm currently seeing. So it looks like I might.
Let's hope this demo we're going to run in on this computer survives the rest of the,
yeah,
the hour here.
Don't reboot. Okay. All right. So let's start with Joe. You want to start from a blank one and then show the creation process and decide how we want to roll with this.
Yeah, let's just and that'll give a good overview of some of the column types that you can use. So I'm going to use Microsoft Lists app. Click New List here at the top. And you're presented with a great kind of opening wizard, you could say, of options to get started with creating a list. There's some great templates. Some of these you can just kind of take them and run with them. They have columns created for you, choice columns created for you, views already pre-created, so you can do some of that. This is also a great way to just understand some ideas that are available and how you could use Microsoft Lists. One that was potentially, I guess this is actually something that's new. We could talk about it while we're here, was a playlist option in Microsoft Lists. So that was something kind of new for this month. This gives you the ability to put videos, audio into a playlist that files that live up in your OneDrive or up in SharePoint, something that we've been waiting for a long time. You got some training material, that's a great option to choose that. You can choose to create a list from an existing list. So maybe you've got a template that you have all the columns that you want, and maybe monthly or annually you want to use that list. You can use create from an existing list. You'll get all those columns again. You can, if you've got an existing Excel spreadsheet or a comma separated value file, you can also import that. And that'll get you the columns created. That'll get you the data imported also. Sometimes the columns may not come through exactly the file type or the column type you might want sometimes. So if these don't work out for you exactly, that you can actually cut and paste rows of data from Excel and paste them into your web browser into a SharePoint list. So that's another way you could get data in there. But let's start with a blank list. Give this a name. Get a few options here. Let's pick some orange and a cup of coffee. Now, where do I want to put this? My list, that's going to be your OneDrive. Clicking this drop down, we have options to put it into a team that you are a member of. I'll put this one into our community team. Show on site navigation. If you're a user of SharePoint, that will show up in the site navigation of the SharePoint site that list is going to get added to. So that's what that is for. But we're going to select those options and create. By default, you're always going to have a title column. And this is a required column for all these items that list that gets started. You can rename that column, so you can call it something else if you want to. Vendor, farm, you can do something like that, but that's kind of one of your key columns that you want to base your list on. What we want to view and go through right now is all the column types that you can manage to get in here. And again, making the right choice is helpful for you to reduce bad input, making sure that you've got proper data that's coming in. Again, much easier to do with this than in Excel. Right off the bat, we've got a nice little wizard here that shows us a number of different types. Text, choice, we got date times, multi-lines of text. A person column is another term is a people picker. If you choose that and enter someone from your organization, it also is helpful to give you a contact card, like a pop-up overview of that person. Those are great for assigning items to people. That's often used for that. We've got numbers. We've got some yes, no, hyperlink, currency. Location is pretty interesting. It actually will take an address field. Images, some advanced items, metadata. Lookup. Lookup is a way to bring in information to your list from another list that you might manage somewhere. We just pick one of these. Let's pick choice. Say this is one of our favorites because this helps us decide a way to make sure our data is consistent. We've seen this with like status columns, might be helpful. We've got 3 choices here if we want. Maybe we only need 2 choices. We can X that out. We can add another choice. Ready, say completed. And you've got some options here. If you don't like that color, completed, ready. Let's do green, completed. You can choose default values. When, let's say, a new list item gets put into here, let's set it to ready to start with. And we can save that. If we were to add a date and time, there's a number of options in here. Let's call it start date. You can include the time. Friendly format gives you so many minutes or hours kind of since it was entered, and eventually it will, after a certain amount of time, it will maybe put a date in there, but it's like 3 hours ago kind of friendly format. And Let's see, more options. These are some things where you can require this column. Perhaps you've got to have some data in here. You want to make sure people always fill this out. That's hidden up under more options. And default values, we get this too. Let's just say when something comes in, I kind of want it to start with today's date. Save that. If we were to put a new item in here, we've already got status set to ready. We've got our start date set to right now. And let's just call this first row item. Let's add another one here, and let's change this to completed. Now, off the bat, we are going to be looking at a view called All Items. Got this drop down in the upper right. It does provide you a couple other views of the same data. There's a compact list. The rows get a little squished. And there's a gallery view where it looks like tiles. You've got images, different types of we've got an image column in here. This might be nice to show. An image can be on here. If you notice in the all items, there's an asterisk there right now. That means there's been some change to this view. Let's say if I want this view to be consistent and set that way all the time, I can save that view and I can just keep the same name if I want. Typically, it might not be a best practice to always choose and edit all items. Sometimes I like to just leave that as like the default raw state of your data. Some way to kind of always come back to seeing all the columns the way it is. So let's call this board. Or we call this tiles. Let's call this tiles. Make this a public view. That means everybody will have an option. Anybody that joins in here will have this option to see tiles.
And let's pause on that real quick.
Yep.
Because that's important. That you can decide how you consume the data that's in this list. And again, if we go back to the air quotes of database, spreadsheet, all that stuff, you can be looking at the same data set as a coworker, but be looking at it completely different than the way that they're looking at it. And fun fact, for those of you who attended any of the conferences that Joe and I did in Teams, the agenda was one massive list despite whatever track you were currently looking at. So based on whatever room you were in, ornamentals or, horticulture or whatever it could have been, we were filtering how you saw that data to make it relevant to that current track. And you can even make your own personalized view of this data. And so you'll really start to see, like, maybe Dom likes board view and Joe doesn't. He can make his own view and do however he wants to do that. And so that right there is, I feel like, very powerful.
And because let's say this is the view that we've decided we want as a default. Again, if I select that view, I can set it as the default. So that's a way to leave that all items. So what does that mean by setting that as default? That means the next time I leave and come back into this list, this is the view that's going to show up for everyone. They can still come up and hit for everyone. Yep, for everyone. So I'm gonna do another option in here. I'm gonna save this view as just ready. And we're gonna edit this current view now. Now this is not a very modern looking page yet. Maybe someday.
Scary, isn't it?
Yeah, someday maybe we'll get this. So this is This is kind of the back end view, SharePoint view of this information. Hopefully this will no reason to not go in here, because again, you just created a brand new view and you're just editing that view. If you mess up, you can delete and go back to your all items, create a new view, and come back in and start editing it again. So feel comfortable to do this. What I want to do is I named this one called Ready. If you've got some type of list where there is some status messages, and maybe you're working through a workflow where eventually rows of data are not pertinent anymore and you don't want to view them all the time, this is what you can do. We can filter this view. So I'm going to come down into a little bit further. We can see these are all the columns that are available to us. We were just showing title, status, start date. If I wanted to, I could show like who modified it last, who created this list item. Those are some other things that are kind of hidden back here if you want. But you can sort. So you can choose to sort.
What's that last column?
This one?
No, in the very bottom checkbox there to number 25.
Version? Yeah, very nice. So that will tell you if you've got multiple versions of this. So if people are changing, you're used to versions with files. Hope you take advantage of that. This gives you the ideas that you can actually have versions of a list item, a single row. So instead of Excel, where you have an entire new file as a version, this gives you just that row item as a different version and enables you to go back and restore that information. So again, one more way to feel like a database, feel a little more safe about your data.
500 versions per, well, that's the default, but per, again, air quotes are coming out, per row in your spreadsheet. Like, that's nuts. Like, yeah, this is definitely not a spreadsheet.
So we've got a sort order we can do with this data. We had a date in there. So let's go to our start date and let's set those in descending order. And filter is what I wanted to show here. I want to just say show items when status is equal to ready. And you can get complicated in here. You could have a couple different columns need to be set in a certain way. They all need to be set in a certain way, or just you have an and an or options here. There's a number of other options in here. Styles, you can sum, totals, you can group by, but we're just going to stick with that for now. Save that. So now I've got a view called Ready, and it's filtered down to just show me status of ready. So if I create a new item in here, it defaults to ready. This is our third row item. And that's going to show up in this list. I come in here to our first row and somebody's done some work on this. I'm going to set it to completed and save that. Next time you come in here, we hit ready. That's going to be gone. And like, where did everything go? It's still there on all items.
The capacity of a list is massive. If you're coming close to the, millions of items or whatever that you could have in here, please let me know. I want to know about it. But a lot of people in our experience have questioned, can this handle my workload? Can this handle what I'm about to throw at it? And the answer is in 99% of the use cases, yes. yes, it can. It can take a lot. So
one caveat to that real quick is there is a kind of a best practice to keep the view of items at one time. So your different views below 5,000 items. So your all items, you might have thousands and thousands and thousands of items in here, but anytime you want to kind of filter that down to something that probably should be under 5,000 is a is a kind of a need for this to work. Large lists. There you go. Thanks.
Yeah. So I just dropped a link to the doc in the chat there. First sentence, you can store up to 30 million items in a list. So if an extension agent has 30 million contacts, that's that's amazing. Could you embed a view only list if someone wanted to have this publicly visible? That's interesting because there are a few different flavors of lists. There is the ability to share a list as an anyone link and do a view only. I actually did that with a group that my wife does some volunteer work for. They have a nonprofit edition of Microsoft 365, and I showed them how they could make some stuff available. And it was actually a quote unquote calendar. Again, I'm going to use calendar in air quotes because it's a board with, days and times and stuff on it. So it looks like a calendar. But they wanted a kind of a protected view of a calendar for events for this organization, but they needed people from outside to be able to see it. And so Joe's showing you right there that you can do any one link that is set to view only, and you can share out the list itself. And remember the views and stuff that you can set. You can kind of tweak the URL a little bit to make it view possibly the way that you want. But yeah, you can do that.
Let's see what this.
Now, as far as embedding it in a public facing website, we heard a whole lot about, especially calendaring. I keep going back to calendaring. People wanting to be able to publish an events calendar. These are the events that are coming up, and yeah, you could do that. Joe, I'm not. We were talking about this earlier today, and I've talked about it with teammates and stuff internally, that calendaring is just freaking hard for some reason. I don't.
There's a lot of options. It really comes down to what the user experience you want out of it. So
yeah. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. But I would definitely try it and see what it looks like, and see how can you make it format and appear, and then get an idea of okay, it does the job, but it doesn't look the way we like, or whatever it might be. Oh, so you're looking at your list now in big L again.
Yep. Yeah.
So back to that.
Just showing you same thing. Those views I created are here. They're all ready there. There's my ready view. Can access those there too. So yep. One thing I want to show is maybe there's aspects to Excel which is really nice that you like, is the ability to input quickly. I can click on this item. I can see these items here. I can click, and I'm clicking, I'm kind of editing this. Maybe you've got more data that you want to input. There is something called grid view, edit in grid view. And this is going to feel and look a little bit more like Excel. I've got rows. They're all these rows are kind of ready, and they're waiting for me to click in. They're already in edit mode, basically. I can, right here is new item. I can come in here, fourth row. I can tab through. I'm already going to get my default column statuses. I can kind of work this way. And you can also paste data into this way. If I had a Excel spreadsheet that had, in this case, 3 columns, I would want a column with some type of text. I'd want a column that had either ready or completed in it, the text ready or completed, and a date time. I could come in here and Control V, paste right in this column, and it will put those in. I've pasted 10 rows, 100 items at a time. It's taken it just fine. That's one way to kind of get data in. If you've got an existing Excel file, Again, take advantage of the column types. I would recommend is create from scratch a Microsoft list, and then cut and paste, copy and paste your data from your Excel into your Microsoft list.
And
And
that's
you
really
can,
important to know that, it's not incredibly challenging to take an existing document, an existing spreadsheet that's doing something for you that you kind of wish it did a little bit more, and move it into a list and experiment with a list there. It's as easy as copy and paste, like Joe said, but it is important to make sure that your columns are already configured to match the columns that are coming from your Excel document. And Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you create a list, um, is there a option to create a list from an Excel spreadsheet, if I
yes,
recall?
there was, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you could even just start like that, you know? So that's an option as well.
I wanted to show the version history real quick there. So again, on a single row item, I'm pulling up our favorite three little dots, our little meatball menu. I'm going to version history. You can see initially called it fourth lowercase row. I updated it to fourth row. You can see what exactly changed between those versions. Here, we do have some better change tracking in Excel now. If you're on the latest version using cloud, but this also manages the ability to revert a single column like that too, which is very nice.
Yeah, and that's a good call out that Excel now has the show me catch up button, I think is it's called. And you can see values per cell and what they were prior to their change. Which is pretty cool. This is, I feel like, a little bit deeper, in the sense that, again, like a database, this is an entry in a database, and each entry is going to have, by default, 500 versions per entry. And I think it's also important to note that because these entries are treated as their own little individual entity, when they're deleted, they also are going to follow the same rules as when a file is deleted from a SharePoint team site or, OneDrive. They're actually going to go to the recycle bin. So you do still have a 93-day window to go into the recycle bin, and you're going to see list items sitting in the recycling bin and who deleted them, and have the ability to restore them and put them back.
Continuing on, we were kind of up here looking at views. Another thing we have is a filter icon up here. This is, again, a little bit more. You might be used to this in Excel. It's going to pick up automatically on some of the concepts around what are some of the key columns here that we could filter on. So this is sort of a live, you're kind of on the fly creating yourself views. So I can just say, I just want to see completed. There's individual titles. I could just have, if I had a greater range of dates, I could specify individual dates on this one if I wanted to. So that's built in right up there at the top. You can access some of these also on your column headings. So for status, you're going to have the ability to sort and filter by and group. I can, obviously sort different ways on these items. Filter, that's going to give me just those. I can apply it. I can see those kind of options. Include all
And
those
this is
back down.
different than a view, right?
Yes,
This is
this is on the
just
fly,
on the
ad
fly.
hoc.
Yeah.
Yep. Set that up.
Just want to make sure that that we point that out, but that is useful. Can we dive into some of the other view capabilities? Do we have enough data there for calendar? Does calendar require start and
It needs a
end date?
start and it needs a start and an end date.
Yeah, that's
So
what I
I think
thought.
we've
So
got. Let's check. Do we have? We had a visit date.
yeah.
Okay. Um, let's just see if we've got one that has got a couple of those built in. Travel requests. I don't think that's going to have. Start date, end date. Let's try this one. I can create a new view. And this is where we get some options. One of them is calendar. Let's do calendar. Let's see if this is picking it up. Travel. We've got a start date and we've got a travel end date. We need those. And we'll call this calendar view. We have a default layout, an entire month view, or we have a week view. I'm just going to hit create. Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you, Joe, but I just was reading that it says that if you're creating your calendar view and you want to key off of just one specific date column, you can select that for both the start and the end.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure what that calendar looks like, but I guess that would work if you need to.
Worth a try.
Yep. This one we have some start and end dates, so I'm gonna hit create. I'm gonna go back to all items. Let's see, when were these? These are in April. So if we go in April, there's our items. I can click on this item. There's the information about it. I can edit, update it. I've got a kind of nice view like this.
And that's cool to show that a particular item, and again, remember the list is a database and you get to decide how you view and consume the data. So you could add a calendar view to any list if that is the more practical way to consume the data that list is trying to show you. But you can see that there is something that spans multiple days. You can have it, I don't know how far down you can go, to just 1 hour, maybe. I think you can have date and time on there as well. But again, this is not a calendar. I would call it a schedule, right? I feel like calendar implies more functionality. But this is simply just looking at, events in a date format that's, natural to us.
While we're doing this real quick, I'm gonna create another view. I'm not sure what this is going to look like, but this is board view. So this might be a little more like Trello feeling capable. So a board view is, if you're a Microsoft Planner user, this list can sort of act that way. These boards are your buckets, you could kind of say, that if you're used to Microsoft Planner. So just going off on this, let's just sort by airline. So now as items come in that this is a travel that we think we're going to do on Southwest. Well, maybe that's not gonna work out. Maybe British Airways can get us there. I can drag and drop that item around to these columns, these boards, and that's going to automatically update that column for airline to this item wherever I drop this. So if I drop this to British Airways, now if I open up this item, you can see the airline is set to British Airways. So that feels a little bit like Planner. You've got your buckets of work, and again, there's as mentioned in the chat, there's some other tools out there that kind of act that same way you might be used to.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are willing to go through the effort to take workloads that were inside of Microsoft Planner and put them into Microsoft Lists because they need to be able to create exactly what their team needs, versus Planner is more like a turnkey solution where it's like, here, we're giving you this app and this is what it does, versus List is kind of more for the creators who need to create what they want that list to look like and do. And they both have different, strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, you could totally create columns that equaled your Kanban, status, like doing, done, on hold, you know, in the pipeline, those types of things, which is pretty cool.
One nice thing that you get also with a Microsoft list, different than Excel, is you have built in some rules that you can take advantage of.
I was
As we
thinking this
showed
might go
kind of-
into list part 2, Joe, but I'll hit it because I want to show, I want
Okay.
people to see this.
Get an idea. This is some options here. So you've got some rules. What does that mean? So things can change on your list. Do you wanna know when things happen on your list? How do you do that in Excel? You got to open it up every time. You got to look for that. This gives you the ability to check when a column changes, when a value changes. Do you want to be notified when there's a new item, or we want to know somebody deleted something? So these are some items, some rule sets that are built right in that make it really easy to do some of these basic but often needed ways to manage and track changes to your lists. We won't dive into those, but those are an option there to give you a better understanding of that.
For our work order system mock-up that we did last month, I could see a Microsoft form is accepting data input from people outside, which lets you empower them to input data into your Microsoft list. And then you're using Power Automate flows to take that data and push it into the said Microsoft list. And then you could either continue to use the flow for other things, or you could then rely on the automation rules that are built directly into lists to, let's say, get an email when something happens. And so, fun fact, I'll let everybody in on a big insider secret. Every single time somebody signs up for Cloudy County, that is exactly what happens. We have a form that people fill out. It sends everything to a Microsoft list. Joe and I both get an email to let us know that somebody signed up. And then Joe and I are tracking those as if they're like, you know, items tasks that need to be completed. And then when I do one and mark that item as completed using a choice column, it will notify both Joe and myself to let each one of us know, like, hey, I got that one. It's done. He knows he doesn't need to go and worry about it. And, you know, we just carry on with our day. So if I see one pop in and I'm in a spot where I can just knock it out real quick, he doesn't have to worry about it, or vice versa. So very practical, very simple. I mean, it didn't take very long for us to set it up. And we've actually already shown between last month's call and this month's call, you've probably got everything that you need to replicate that, which is, I think, hopefully pretty cool. And I definitely think we could go into a list V2 or part 2 if people want to go into some more of the automation and some more of the tracking. But the original inspiration for this was after the call last month, someone was saying, I could see my extension office using lists to track our contacts that we make with folks in our county and who we're working with and what were they working on. And, you know, so once you develop that skeleton or schema of the type of information that you're curious about collecting and tracking, those become columns in this Microsoft list. And as they get filled out by the people who know the answers to those columns, you're going to start to build out like I don't know, I don't want to say CRM, but I want to just say like a super high tech Rolodex,
right? Maybe for that teaser for 2.0, I'm going to leave us one other little item here that I think is diving into the deep part of a list, but very helpful. And I think it's something that you're going to see and you're going to want to do sometimes. If you get a list that's got a lot of items like this, and I go to edit one of these, if you've got a number of items here, you might end up scrolling a lot, depending on what this looks like. So there's a trick that we can do, and I can format this form, this input form. I've got a drop down here, and I can configure this layout. I've got a header up here. I've got a body, which is this main section, and I've got a footer. All I'm going to do is we're going to go to body, and I'm going to drop a little bit of text in here. And we'll drop some links here in the chat. I'm just going to drop a little bit of text. I'm going to save that. And now this is kind of reactive to the amount of space that I have. Automatically is going to make it so I don't have to scroll that. It'll kind of move it over to the side and expand that out. It wraps that area better. That's a very quick little easy. I'm going to drop that code into the chat, or I'll drop a link to that, because there's a lot of other concepts and ways to edit these forms. But the list formatting is pretty amazing what you can do with a list. You can make it look like not a list. You'll find and discover a lot of other options in there. So it feels like you're programming, but just a little bit of text, copy paste, and that will save you a lot of effort. I think the last thing we'll do is drop in a link. If you want to get more information on lists and deep dive, there's a great AKA MS to get in there. This for those on the video, that's aka.ms/MS lists will get you to this resources.
Cool. Well, I think I'll maybe poll people, or maybe we'll just decide to do a list 2.0 and see if we can build out some more mock content. But again, I think this was a lot of information, and between the last couple of meetings and this meeting, you can really start to see how those solutions really can talk to one another and work together and let you create a customized business process, with tools that you already have. None of this stuff costs anything as far as like premium licenses or anything like that. This is all built right into the suite. So and that's what we're all about, is making you realize the tools that you have access to and the power that's there. So thanks everybody. I'm going to turn the recording off, but Joe and I are going to hang out for just a little bit. I got to run for a meeting in about 15 minutes, but we're going to hang out and take any questions or just chat with y'all. And thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
See you next month.